Yeah. So I'm recording also. Huh? So we can see that we wanted to understand that there were actually political parties who supported Awami League and BNP, and then we were talking about left parties, whether they support or not. I think we should also look into the historical authoritarian and undemocratic regimes in 1970s, whether they supported uh, and uh, and the democratic governments in 90s, what was the difference between their support? And another related argument is this, that there is a notion of Islamic economic system. There is a notion of Islamic economic system, and whether people, how many people support that Islamic economic system. And then, of course, what is the second preference? That is socialistic economy. Socialist economy is also that people support. Okay. Therefore, actually, we have to look to understand the society, to understand the economy, and to understand the role of different strata in Bangladeshi society. Because, you know, if you go to the School of International Relations, these things will not be there. They will not teach you these things. It is only with the sociological perspective that we are trying to understand the internal aspects of internal societal economic aspect of the what is this? What is this? I don't know what things pop up in between. Now, so we can see now, we can observe that how what was the societal response which we have to look into. Now, to begin with, let us see and this again, I'm taking, you know, this article of Muhammad Nuruzzaman, and you know, this article is published in the book Veena Kukreja and Mahendra Prasad Singh, edited, Democracy, Development and Discontent in South Asia. Democracy, Development and Discontent in South Asia. Veena Kukreja and Mahendra Pratap. It is Sage publication. I think this article, have you got this article with you? Nuruzzaman's article? No, but I'm actually doing. So, you know, if we look into, there were widespread political movement, and Bangladesh witnessed political protest movements and demonstrations against the pro-market reforms in 90s, 80s and 1990s. The two important classes which were in forefront for the protest, which were leading the movement and demonstrations, they were industrial workers and rural peasants. Now, if you look into the industrial worker, then we have to also look into the historical nature of the industrial worker of the Bangladeshi society. Why? Because, you know, it is important that why the most violent of protests had come from the industrial workers. If we know the history, then and then only we can appreciate that how this class has demonstrated, why this class has demonstrated so vehemently. Now, historically speaking, the current industrial worker is the second or third generation industrial worker in the Bangladesh. This industrial worker of 80s and 90s, this is the
There,
third generation.
there is somebody in the waiting room, if you can allow.
And
Mrigank is trying to admit himself. You will have to allow him.
okay, anything more? Okay,
No, no, sorry.
fine. So if we look into history, we are saying that this is the second and third generation uh, workers. Now we should actually pause and ponder what was the nature of the first generation workers in 1947 when India was partitioned and they moved to East Pakistan, that is Bangladesh. Now, if we look into that, Pakistan, Bangladesh, the East Pakistan at that time had no industry whatsoever. They did not have any industry. Even not even a single jute mill, although it was the largest supplier of the raw jute, but there was no jute mill even in there. Now, and good number of large scale jute, sugar and cotton textile industries were in 1950s, they got established here, but not by the East Pakistan people. Rather, industrialists came from Karachi and they developed, they established. So that means the Bengali entrepreneurs were not there and they entered in the field very late. Now, the Pakistani state helped or aided entrepreneurs belonging to the West Pakistan. And Pakistan state was very supportive. It was so supportive that even under the Essential Service Maintenance Act promulgated in 1952, it prohibited trade unions. That cannot be used. That was the help for the West Pakistan people who had established industries in the East Pakistan, that is Bangladesh. Now, it was only very late in 1969 that the government allowed industrial workers. So I don't want to go into that detail. Now, if we look into the general anti-labor position of the Pakistan ruling elite was, very, very visible anti-labor position. Now we have to just underline that why this anti-labor position of Pakistani ruling elite existed. It existed because Muslim League lacked connection with any labor formal or labor front during the movement of independent Pakistan. They did not have any wing. And therefore, they had no firm ideological conviction towards the labor. And it is said that Pakistani elite were persuaded by American advisors as well. And American advisors were very clear that they asked for to adopt a development strategy that recognized functional inequality. Functional inequality. Now, in this, the development process were concerned only for the elites and not the working class. So they were not with the working class. So this was the background, especially in the East Pakistan. The majority of the industrialists were from West Pakistan, and actually they were not native. Now, what happened after independence? That is, we have to look into. After independence, Awami League accepted the control or tried actually attempted to control labor militancy. Now, we have just seen that why there was labor militancy. One was that the most of the industrialists were from the Western Pakistan, and also there were no way, or there was no law which supported them, and therefore there were no policies, there were no program, there was no security, and therefore there was total ban on strikes, lockouts, and different types of activity of the labor. Now, therefore, laborers were militant. By the time independence occurred in Bangladesh, they were already militant, and that's where Awami League wanted to control the labor militancy. The workers actually prominently participated in the war or independence war, and that's why Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was very much for the laborer movements, and therefore he started actually lots of say security measures, especially after 1972. There were a lot of measures which were taken.
So sorry to interrupt. So Diksha, Rahul, and Sumitra are waiting to be added.
What is this? This is not classroom. So we can see this. Yeah. Are they all in now?
Yeah, they're in.
Yeah, we can see that actually that how this whole movement, they started actually, the laborers had actually been militant, and now, but after 1970s, actually there were labor laws, and the Bengal constitutional amendment, they started actually some security measures, and they wanted that toiling masses should not be exploited. But we can see this, that the labor was exploited during the British period. That was the experience of the first generation. They were exploited through the Pakistani rule, and they thought that they will be exploited in the new liberal economy also. And therefore, they were opposing vehemently strikes and lot of lockouts, and of course vehement strikes were there. Now this is important for us to know. Now there is also something which has to be registered here, that the general atmosphere which has been explained by a number of writers, and especially this is US Aid, how it is trying to explain the general atmosphere at that time. And US Aid says that strikes are automatically called whenever a public enterprise is even rumored to be privatized. Even if there is a rumor, then strikes started taking place. If it is a rumor that a public enterprise is going to be privatized, they will come. Several union, sponsored disinvestment resistance committees have sprung out. So they formed union-sponsored disinvestment committees, resistance committees. So there were resistance committees, and also, small demonstrations, and almost daily, they started occurring daily, and especially in Dhaka, these small little groups, they were so much of, in. Now, having said this, nature of resistance, if you want to read a little bit more on the nature of resistance, you can read Claire, C-L-A-R-E, Claire E. Humphrey, Hamphrey, Claire E. Humphrey. How to write, I don't know actually. Yeah, I think you can write this somewhere. Claire E. Humphrey, I think you can look into. Privatization in Bangladesh, economic tradition in a poor country. Okay, this is, of course, Dhaka University Press. And it is in this, the resistance movement has been given. The experience of reformers, I don't know. Saying buy Zoom. How can I buy Zoom? Oh.
Akansha has also by accident left. Please reallow her.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So actually, we were just, the experience of reforms is accompanied by political upheaval or flare-ups in Bangladesh. It is, of course, it was there in South Asia in most of the places, but it is seen that in Bangladesh, it was a very, very vehement and very critical, actually, uprising. Now, let us see the reason why there was actually so much of this. Let us see the reason. What were the main causes of the societal response that was seen, that was sharp, violent reforms, against the pro-reforms? That there are two main reasons. These are, of course, general reasons, but he has tried to explain. One, there are two main causes. One was the reforms are imposed by the ruling elites. Reforms are not negotiated outcomes between different social groups. The governments do not take into account, Now, you can put differently. In other words, what you can say that the governments that implement economic reforms rarely think it is necessary to engage with the societal groups, as we say that, the stakeholders. There should be a dialogue over reforms, policies, and they do not have this. So if there is a dialogue, there is a debate, then you can definitely have a balanced approach. But that balanced approach gets missed. The government elites bypass practically all the groups which are going to be affected. Now, we can ask that why there is a bypass. Why people bypass? They are bypassed in the name of promoting competitive market structures. So they have concluded on that. The elites have concluded that there has to be a competitive market structure. The existing market structure is not competitive. We want to make it more competitive, more efficient in the allocation of national resources. It has to be more competitive and more efficient. That's what the plea which the elites, the government takes over. Now, the dictators, the role of dictators and the democratic rule, they are similar. It's not that dictators have sided and they have not actually, they have been against the people, but we have seen that both, whether it is dictator or whether it is democratic. If we see till 80s, there is particularly reform policies they were implemented by undemocratic authoritarian military regimes, and therefore they were not interested in talking to people, having a dialogue with the people. But the regimes, the societal regimes, which were quite basically, you can say, democratic, the Awami League or Bangladesh National Party, was there any different take? No, there was. The situation did not improve. It remained as undemocratic as it was in the democratic period. So lack of democratic culture, that is the most important. Lack of democratic culture eventually led to a face-off between reformers and between people who were against reform. Now let us come to the second reason why actually there were lot of protests against the pro-market economy. The second important factor was the indifference or unwillingness of the government leaders to make redistributive interventions in the implementation of process of economic reforms. Now this this in turn can be further developed because of two reasons. One, this was largely due to the class character of the ruling elite. Why they were not willing to adopt a redistributive intervention? This was because of the nature of the ruling elite, the character of the ruling elite, and also the developmental model in operation. Now, if you look into the neoliberal model, developmental model, that is always biased and obsessed with the idea of so-called perfect market. It needs a perfect, that is what actually they are biased. The model, the developmental model, the capitalist developmental model is always, they are obsessed with the idea of perfect market. Now, in this regard, one point should be noted here, that though the ruling elite, the political elite, the governing elite, the so-called, the capitalist people, though they are basically hell-bent on arguing that there is a perfect market model, but in real world, it never exists. In spite of the fact, it never exists, that but people are basically talking about this. And in that sense, there is a loss of redistributive justice. Now, in that context, therefore, friend, the ruling elite, they become blind to the redistributive justice, and therefore the neoliberal developmental model is not concerned about poverty or growing economic disparity, but it favors growth at any social cost. That is a very important aspect of globalization, which can be implemented in India as well. That at any social cost, they are only talking about development. They are talking about develop without taking note of growing poverty. Okay. Now, the industrial and the agriculture wage laborers and uh, are the are the most vulnerable along with the other social groups. They are completely left out in the developmental, the model, which is basically capitalist developmental model. And therefore, there is no social security. The issue of social security starts emerging. And hence people started protesting against reforms that have been very aggressive, very violent in nature. Now let us see that what is the another responses of the people. Now, if we look into, as soon as the economic reforms started, the state-owned enterprises, they were supposed to be deregulated. Deregularization of the public sector units or state-owned units, as is happening in India, it started there long back. Now, we can see that except the business and industrial classes, no one supported this in the beginning. In Bangladesh, no one supported. Everyone vehemently criticized the capitalist model of development. Now, we have just said that what were the main reasons. One of the historical reasons which I want to underline here, that they had experienced exploitation, economic exploitation during the British period. They had experienced exploitation through Pakistani regimes at the hand of Pakistani classes, and they were thinking that they are going to have the experience. So they have historical experience. We also know that how British exploited and dismantled Indian economy, cottage industries, and they left in lurch the people. So that the third generation has not forgotten. And the second reason their aversion was, Bangladeshi society, the social groups, they cherished a dream of egalitarian society. When they became free, when they became independent, they cherished a very, very important element, that was egalitarian social values. And therefore, they were obsessed by this also. They were obsessed by. Hence, we can observe that anti-market mood in Bangladesh had actually a historical mooring and also a value which was cherished by the society. So what type of system, an economic system, which Bangladeshi people preferred. Now, if we go by a survey, it is said that Islamic system of economy, which was wedded with social justice and economic equality to the citizen, that was the feeling which people of Bangladesh wanted when they got independent. According to a survey conducted at the end of 1980, a survey was conducted, which type of economy you want. And people, the idea of an Islamic system which emphasized Islamic values in the conduct of business. So interest motive was not there. Profit motive is not there in the Islamic value of conduct of business. And also, Islamic value of conduct of business upholds distributional justice or distributive justice. Now, this enjoyed overwhelming support of the people. Approximately 50% of the respondents supported, and approximately 66% of the working class supported. 66% of the working class supported. 50% of the total people. 23% of the group of employees, government employees, they supported Islamic system, economic system. The second preference which the Bangladeshi society gave was socialistic pattern. The second preference was of socialistic economy. Only 5 to 7% of the population, they supported capitalist system in the working class. Now let us come to the opposition. The first opposition came from the left-leaning academicians. And left-leaning academicians saw reforms a way of creating a new exploitative class. This was a new exploitative class where bilateral and multilateral donors and institutions, they will be exploiting. Earlier, the British were exploiting, and after that, the Pakistani industrialists were exploiting. Now we see the bilateral and multilateral donors will exploit. That was the left-leaning academicians. Second thing, the left-leaning academicians view pro-market reforms as an unfolding process of the where the state actively supports the rich to get richer and leaves the poor the poorer. So have and have nots, the two-class system will be created. As for empirical evidence is concerned, to defend their case, they cite widening gap between income and wealth distribution between the higher group and the bottom. So there is lot of difference between the two. Now, the historical experience, of course, was there, and because of that, we know the historical experience, the left-leaning academicians, they were talking about that how these opportunities have been created for exploitation. Now, what was the role of the bureaucrats? Bureaucrats were a privileged lot. They were privileged class, and they were basically opposed to dismantling of the regulatory system to liberalize the economy, because there was deregulation, privatization. Now, what was the exact reason? Why did they oppose? The bureaucrats did not oppose the reform because of humanitarian or egalitarian principles. It's not because of that actually they were supporting. It's not the egalitarian social values, but they opposed simply because of the fear of losing control on four things. One, they will lose control over decision making in the process, whatever the decision. Another, they will also be losing the benefits associated with the official position and status. So what will be the foreign investment, foreign exchange, allocation to a particular policy, imports and trades, investment in the marketing, and last but not least, the decision making. So they were basically afraid that they will be losing all this. Now, bureaucrats, of the subcontinent, and Philip Mason, the men who ruled, you can read actually that they are considered to be the boss. So the bureaucrats of the subcontinent, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, they enjoy high status, and they were accustomed of exercising control over economy and society. And therefore, they did not allow that if there will be economic development of this liberalized order, they will lose their position, and therefore they opposed. The third group which opposed was political parties. Now, what is the position? Whether they opposed or whether they actually. Now, the position of the political parties in economic reforms are sharply divided on the ideological lines. The two dominant political parties, Awami League and Bangladesh National Party. Now, there were economic factors because of which they did not oppose. Bangladesh National Party came into existence in the 1970s, and Bangladesh National Party has historical alliance with business and industrial community. Since the time of establishment, it was in alliance, historical alliance with business and the industrial location. So it was established by Ziaur Rahman, we all know, the military administrator and the chief patron of Bangladesh National Party. Now these traders, they were the supporters, they were the donors, and they dominated various central committees of the party. Now, how can they oppose? They were the member of the parliament. They were the people who were leading. So in that context, they did not oppose, rather they supported, and they tried to implement reforms, policies. The Awami League, the situation was different. Now, Awami League, originally a party of the bourgeoisie. Ajay, there is 1 minute left. What to do? Should we finish this or we should go on? We should stop and we should come again. When do you want the class? Today, 15 people are there. Hurry up. 1 minute only left.
So we can finish this.
Wednesday, or you want another session?